Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was betrayed and banished by TSUANDE bashing. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by OneWin and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 1. The Konoha Council of Clans was almost as old as the village itself. Instituted by Hendo Hyuga, it was his prerequisite for the Hyuga to join the recently founded village. While the Uchiha and the Senju could bring their grievances to their respective clan heads, the other clans and their members had less say in how matters were handled. Thus, the other clans gathered under the banner of the Hyuga clan and requested fair representation. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, was immediately taken with the idea, and the evening of the day it was proposed, the Council of Clans had their first session. Every month the heads of Konoha's largest clans met in the conference room opposite to the Hokage's office. And today's meeting was coming to a very painful end. And so we come to the last subject of this month's meeting. The Hokage droned on, an uncharacteristic monotone seeping in his voice. The possible banishment of Naruto Uzumaki. The last few words hung in the air, all those present knowing exactly how the Hokage thought about it. Around the ancient wooden conference table, rumored to be made by Hashirama himself, clan heads sat up straighter. The last subject for the very boring evening of budgets and petty crime was a much-discussed boy. Most of the clan heads did not even know the fine details of what actually had happened. The truth remained with a few select higher-ups, and how true their facts were, was debated. Everybody had their own version of the facts and an opinion to match. Except of course the genin, because they were expected to shut up and follow orders. Nevertheless, the rumor mill had clearly worked overtime, and the clan heads had made up their mind. If the boy is guilty, then we must banish him. Fugaku, head of both the Konoha police and the famed Uchiha clan said. He kept his eyes focused on the center of the table, refusing to make eye contact with anyone as he continued. It is treason. And banishment is a suitable punishment. But we still don't know for certain. I'm sure he is still ranting and raving about his innocence in his cell. Inoichi Yamanaka, head of interrogation replied. On the other hand, we both know there is nobody else who could have done it. All our trackers say the same, the Hyuga say it's his chakra, a nod from Hiashi, the Inyazuka say it's his scent, a nod from Tsume and the Uch. Yes, we're certain it's his writing. Fugaku finished for him. Let us not dawdle. As both the head of the Uchiha and head of the police force, I propose we banish him and be done with this. Around the table, a series of quick-fired eyes could be heard. A supermajority was forming in the room, almost every clan head supporting the motion. A distraught hand shot out from one of the clan heads, gripping the hand of the Hokage. Minato, please reconsider this. A teary-eyed Kushina, head of the Uzumaki, tried to convince her husband. He's our son, for God's sake, how can you do this to him, to me, to our daughter? She begged. Kushina, dear Minato replied as he caressed her hand, fingers intertwined. I can't just. Enough. An irate Hiashi stood up, anger breaking his carefully trained aristocratic facade, his chair almost tipping over. Konoha is built on sacrifice. We all have friends and family who have laid down their lives for this village. I will not let you insult my brother and my clan like this. The council has decided and consults the Hokage to banish Naruto Uzumaki. Hiashi bit out. The Hokage takes the advice of this august council into consideration and hereby declares a pause. Minato could feel Kushina squeezing his hand. Declares Naruto Uzumaki to be banished from the village. He has 24 hours to leave Konohan territory. This council is hereby adjourned. Shuffling could be heard as the different members left their seats, the Anbu secretary in the corner gathering his notes to later write out into a full-fledged report for the archives. A few clan heads hung around and made small talk in low, whispering voices. The Hokage wrapped an arm around his sobbing wife and left for home. Kushina and Minato went home on the civilian route. One was silently crying, the hiccups of her shoulders and the pearly reflections of the moon in her tears betraying her feelings. The other did not show any emotion, lips pressed in a stoic line, while his eyes stared at the moonlit streets. Turning onto the street where their home was located, the couple could see a single light burning in their house. Halting for a moment, they looked at each other. Are you going to tell Naruko? Kushina asked her husband in soft, hushed tones. Yeah, you do not need to worry, my love, Minato replied, pressing a soft kiss to her head. Just go to bed, I'll be right there. Pushing a key into the door, Minato opened the door. The couple entered quietly, neither needing nor wanting conversation, the events of the last few days having taken a toll on the couple. Helping his wife up the stairs, he put the crying women to bed before moving to the room of his children. Of his child very soon. A soft knock on the door and he entered, sitting down next to his waiting daughter. An arm slipped around her shoulder as Minato wondered how he should break the news. Naruko, princess, it's Ab. He's not coming back, is he? Naruto interrupted his father. Is it true? Are they gonna banish Naruto? She asked, her big green eyes staring deep into her father's. The council decided that banishment was appropriate. Minato told her as he pulled her in for a hug. Thank you for telling me, Dad, she interrupted again, looking away. Could you leave me alone, please? He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Of course. Minato replied as he slowly rose. If there is anything, you can always come to me, honey. For a short eternity it seemed like she wanted to say something, anything, about how she had expected it with all the rumors, or how she would miss him, or any of the thousands of fears and doubts that were currently running through her head and which would haunt her for nights to come. Nothing came, and Naruto just laid down on her bed. Minato left the room, a hand flicking the light switch to off and closing the door behind him. Instead of turning left to the room he shared with his wife, he descended the stairs, moving to his home office. Sinking in his chair, he sought through a few drawers before finding the bottle of hard liquor he kept hidden exactly for these kinds of situations. Neglecting the glass and taking a sip from the bottle, he played around with one of his Hiraishin kunai and stared at a blank stretch of wall while he mulled over the last weeks and everything that had happened. His son a traitor? Someone who would assist Konoha's greatest living criminal? His thoughts flitted over everything. 2 dead Chunin, a dead infiltrator. A wounded son and a stolen scroll. Reports of his loyal trackers. Reports of possibly disloyal Hyuga. Minato knew that something had happened, and while he sincerely doubted the guilt of his son, his hands were tied. Not legally per se, after all, the Hokage's word was law and he could easily pardon his own son. In theory at least. Reality was a bit more delicate. The banishment was necessary, both to secure support amongst the clans, of which the Hyuga were most opposed to his rule, and to possibly prove his son's innocence. If Naruto went to Orochimaru after his banishment, he would admit his guilt. On the other hand, not joining Orochimaru could be part of a bigger ruse. Damned I know you know recursive paradox, Minato thought as he took another sip of his liquor. Dawn's first light found Minato still in his office, sunken in his office chair and staring at an empty bottle. The kunai had found a new place in the wall, thrown in a sudden flash of anger somewhere halfway through the night. In front of him laid a freshly written scroll, filled with techniques and training schemes. Enough to help him survive and become a good ninja, but not enough to pose any kind of danger to the village's security if his son was truly a traitor. A bit like a Jounin sensei in a scroll. When he heard the first sounds of waking upstairs, Minato stood up. A practiced burst of chakra flushed away all tiredness. As Hokage and as an active soldier, all-nighters and sometimes all-weekers were a common occurrence. Rolling up a scroll, he grabbed one of the standard packs lingering in his office. Filled with rations, a first aid kit and other random necessities like kunai, shuriken and wire, it was a piece of standard Konoha equipment that Chunin and above could request if they felt like it. They were free and cheap to produce for the Konoha arsenals, and pretty much every room within Konoha had one or more stashed away. As he entered the hallway, he saw his wife descend the stairs. He could see her bloodshot eyes, cried empty of tears. She had a stack of clothes in her arms, Naruto's clothes. As soon as she saw him and the bag he held, she broke out in renewed sobs, dry and desperate. He plucked the clothes from her arms and stuffed them in the bag. Putting the bag to the ground, he embraced his sad wife. With a tired voice he tried to console her, but he could not make himself sound believable. His soft whispers felt empty, just like his heart did. It was a sunny afternoon, typical of Konoha. A few cute and drowsy white clouds drifted in the blue sky. The sun radiated its burning heat, but the many trees in the village provided ample shadow as the leaves rustled in the refreshing breeze. There was no crowd assembled at the gate, but in the distance a Chiha police Chunin could be seen blocking off the street, hordes of curious people trying to take a peek at the banishment. In front of the gatehouse stood the assembled clan heads, while here and there Anbu agents could be spotted. Just in front of the gate stood Naruto, more shocked and dazed than any other form of emotion. His mother sat on her knees, hugging him while she cried and tried to console herself more than the shocked boy. His father stood behind her, not wanting to meet his son's eyes. Next to his father stood Naruto's twin, Naruko. A stony facade betrayed not a single ounce of emotion, red lips pressed in a thin line, while her green eyes looked empty and dull. Her red hair, inherited from her mother, had lost its normal shine and hung in slightly unkempt tresses from her head. Unusual for a girl otherwise obsessed with appearances. "Kushina, it's time," Minato said. "He needs to go or he'll be in even bigger trouble." "Right," she replied, wiping at her tears. Giving her son a last forceful hug, she whispered to him. "I will always love you, my little baby boy. You need to go now. Make me proud, okay?" An almost imperceptible nod was the answer she received. Kushina stood up and stepped back. Naruto simply turned around and started walking, more of a mindless trudge than the usual happy bounce of the Hokage's son. Soon Konoha was no more than a speck in the distance. Naruto was banished. Betrayed and banished. Chapter 2. The birds were singing, the sun was shining, and the gravel of the road was crunching under Naruto's sandals. It had been a few days since he had left Konoha, how many exactly he did not know because he had not counted neither the days nor the kilometers that had passed since then. He was not exactly lost, but he would not count on being able to locate himself on the map. And he did not have that much food left either. Luckily, it seemed that he was finally leaving the dense Konoha woods. As the thick trees gave way to long grass and small shrubs, Naruto spotted a split in the road. It seemed that the small forest path he was walking on joined a larger, more busy road. And for the first time in what seemed an eternity, a smile found its way on his face. Right next to the split stood a larger building, an inner post station if he had to guess, with people milling about. As he neared the building, he tried to recall what he had read in his father's scroll the previous evening. Challenge yourself to be ever observant of random people. Make it a game to discover their origins and dreams without ever talking to them. Always look underneath the underneath. Narrowing his eyes, he tried to discern the small group of men that had just left the building. Their clothes are too fine to be peasants. Traders. Nah, I don't see any goods. Wait, is that katanas? Samurai probably. Letting them pass, he waited a moment before he entered the inn himself. The room was half full at best, the low roof illuminated by a fire burning in the hearth opposite to the door. A bar, a few roughly hewn tables and chairs completed the picture. Coming to a halt, he hesitated for a moment, never really having done something like this on his own. See, could I rent a room for the night? Food would be nice as well. The innkeeper, an overweight older man both balding and graying, gave the boy a single glance. Of course. I've got the room if you've got the cash. Naruto searched in his backpack for a moment, slipping a few notes out of one of the bundles of Ryo. This enough? He asked, holding out the stack of papers. The man gave a quick look. Sure. Dinner starts at 7. If you make trouble I throw you out and you won't get your money back, understood? The man replied, grabbing a key from somewhere below the bar and putting it on the top in an open offer. Naruto simply dropped the cash and grabbed the key. Stairs are that way, the man pointed to somewhere at the back of the bar. You've got the third room. Naruto turned around and trudged up the stairs. Passing a few doors, he soon found the room he would spend the night in. The door opened without a whine from the hinges. At least it's well maintained. The room was sparse and Spartan in its decoration. A chair in the corner. A heavy wooden frame for the bed, not particularly comfortable looking blanket stacked neatly on top. On the right side there was a small nightstand, an antiquated lamp standing on top. To the left there was a small lavatory, a white porcelain sink with a few cracks running through and a cracked mirror. Dropping his bag on the chair, Naruto almost rushed to the sink, turning open the faucet. Letting the water run through his hands, he tried to refresh himself the best he could, clear water splashing on his face before running down the drain in dirty streaks. Having washed the worst of the dust and muck of his face, he dared to check himself out in the mirror. Thick bags under his eyes, his blonde hair unkempt and dull, and the lines of a worrying frown set in his face. I don't look good. I don't feel good either. Almost as if hit, Naruto dropped on the bed. The shocking events of the past few weeks were finally catching up to him. He tried to think back how he got himself into this situation. Okay, so I failed the academy exam. Then Mizuki told me that there was a secret test, that I should steal the secret scroll. That wasn't true at ALL. Then I got caught and accused of treason. And then I got thrown in jail and then banished. His hands found his face as slow tears started to drip down. Whimpering sobs halted for a moment as the last memory of his mother surfaced, how she held him, before he broke down completely, homesickness and fear and remorse, all coiling together into a ball of misery and suffering. It was a bit past 7 as Naruto came down the stairs. His eyes were empty of tears and his movements fatigued instead of the youthful energy he usually had. The old man behind the bar noticed him and simply pointed towards a small table in the back of the inn. Shambling over to the table, Naruto dropped himself on the chair like a sack of potatoes. Not before long the old man of the inn came over, a tray in his hands. Putting the tray in front of the boy, he took one of the chairs from the table next to them and sat opposite Naruto. I've seen a lot of young men in your situation. Well, not as young as you, at least not very often, but you're not alone. Naruto looked up, not sure how to answer. Eat first. The old man continued. Let me do my piece. Naruto nodded and continued eating his first warm meal in days. You've got some money, but sooner or later that will run out. And I don't have the need nor the resources to hire a helping hand here in the inn. And I don't think you'd want to live your whole life here. It's a calm job, but you're young and you need to see the world. Besides, you look like the adventurous type. Well, I've got a possible solution. There is a nomadic clan that plies the caravan routes past this place. I know their leader, Hiro. Hirosukeyuki is his full name. If you're willing to work, he'll take you with him. You learn and experience some new things, and you can leave them if they reach a town you'd like. Sounds good. Naruto looked up, mumbling something that could be construed as anything. Well, think about it at least. They should have arrived today, but it seems they've been held up somewhere. They'll probably arrive tomorrow, so see that you have decided by then. Having said those words, the old man stood up and left the young blonde alone, with his stewing with his own thoughts. The evening had passed quickly. Not being interested in drinking up his money like the rest of the inn's guests, Naruto had retreated to his room after having finished his meal. And after he had read and tried some chakra exercises from his father, he was now left alone with his thoughts and ponderings. At first it seemed like madness to go with a group of strangers on the advice of a stranger. Maybe they were all part of some larger ring of child traffickers. But if it's a trap or something like that, but I can be robbed by bandits if I walk alone. It kept his mind busy until he fell into a restless sleep. Line break. But the dawn came, the sounds of people waking up, and as the inn slowly came back to life, Naruto did as well. He lingered in bed for a few moments, unwilling to leave the warm and relatively comfortable blankets, before he sat up straight with a burst of motivation. Today might be a very special day. He slid off the bed, grabbing a fresh set of clothes. As he put them on, Naruto noticed a small piece of paper flutter to the floor. Picking it up, he recognized his mother's writing, albeit in a very shaky state. It read, "Baby boy. You will always be my little sunshine, how far you might be. Konoha might no longer be your home, but you will always have a place in my heart. Love. Mom." Turning the piece of paper around, he recognized a picture as the one taken at his last birthday celebration. Himself standing with a bright smile, his sister standing next to him, an unsure and shy smile playing on her lips. Their mom just behind them, mirroring his smile, while their father stood behind them all, a soft but confident smile gracing his face. It took a drip of salty eye water on the shiny plastic paper before he found the courage to put the picture away. Naruto took a deep breath, let it out and resolutely opened the door to his room. With new steel shoved in his spine, he went downstairs. "Hey old man. You got anything for breakfast?" The old man looked up, shoving a piece of hard, dense bread and salted meat towards Naruto. "Here. It's not the best, but it will fill you up real nice." With a muttered thanks, the blonde grabbed the food and started stuffing himself as he walked towards the door. Sitting himself down in front of the inn with the morning sun shining on his face, life did not seem so bleak anymore. Naruto relaxed for a while, just watching the people that passed. Peasants and nobles, monks and samurai, tourists and postal carriages, all manner of folk passed the lonely inn. In the distance he could see a larger group crest the horizon. As they came closer, he noticed how their clothes seemed disheveled. Was this the caravan the old man had talked about? It had taken a while, but the caravan had finally arrived in front of the inn. Settling themselves on the other side of the road in an open field, most of the men and women started setting up tents and other camping material. A few men broke off the caravan and went towards Naruto and the inn behind him. Passing the blonde, writing him off as not important, the men went inside. Deciding to be proactive for once, Naruto stood up and walked towards the camp that was being erected. He was not halted as he meandered between the groups setting up tents. Arriving at the center of the camp, he noticed a woman standing around, looking authoritative with a sword that dangled from her hip, a single hand resting on its pommel. Nothing ventured, nothing gained flashed through his mind, and with a disarming grin, Naruto broke the ice. "Hey, my name is Naruto. Is this the Sukeika's caravan?" The woman sneered at him. "Depends on who is asking. Someone down on his luck, looking to experience the world. We've got no place for charity cases. I swear I can pull my weight." "Yeah, sure." Turning away, the woman ended the conversation. "Damn, why is this woman so antagonistic?" Naruto, almost pig-headed in his stubbornness, continued. "I'm a ninja." One of her eyebrows raised as the woman asked a question. "You look a little young, and you don't have one of those fancy headbands." "Damn, caught in the act." "I didn't exactly finish my training," Naruto replied, trying to salvage his chances. The woman took a long and calculating look. "I'll take it up with the boss. Now scoot." Taking the dismissal for what it was and not wanting to overstay his welcome, Naruto left the tent camp. Wandering around a bit, Naruto watched all sorts of people passing the inn and did his best to look underneath with every single one of them. A while later, the group of men exited the inn, followed by the old man. "Ah, there he is." The old man pointed towards the blonde. "Let me introduce you guys. Naruto, this is Hiro, this is Naruto, the boy I've talked to you about. I'll leave you guys alone for a moment." With those words, the old man left them alone. Finally Naruto could get a good look at the man. Well built, yet his face was marked by the tight lines of someone who had known famine and hunger in his life. He wore simple but sturdy clothes, a dagger hanging from his belt. "You're Naruto?" He started, receiving a nod in return. "Well, I'll be honest. The old man may be a good man, but he's foolish. I need to look out for my people, and I can't just pick up every street urchin that we pass. So I think I'll need to disappoint you, but I can't take you with us." But tried Naruto, only to be halted by a raised hand from Hiro. "Let's face it, kid, you don't seem like much. A scrawny teenager. Life on the roads is hard, boy. I doubt you would survive a week with us." Naruto's only hope seemed dashed, but then a voice sounded from behind him. "Nah, I don't think this kid will be dead weight, boss." The women from earlier spoke up. He didn't wait to be introduced. "He's got balls. And he got the basics of ninja training. At least so he says." Hiro shot Naruto a second look, an appraising eye looking over him. "If you say so, Fujiko." Hiro replied to the woman. Turning back to Naruto, he reached his hand out. "Then you might be welcome, Naruto, if you promise to work hard." "A brash yes sir," was Naruto's answer as he grabbed Hiro's hand, shaking it. "Then I welcome you to the Tsukeuki." Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 3. Neither the Hokage nor the head of police had much in the way of free time. And yet, they managed to sneak in a few hours of relaxing in, every now and then. This evening, both men found themselves together on the backyard porch of a vacant house. From a legal point of view it was trespassing, but when you were on top of the village totem pole or head of law enforcement, laws became suggestions more often than not. Yet sometimes, even they could not escape the inevitability of law. As the last rays of sunlight bathed the grassy garden in a warm red glow, both men were mulling over just such a case. Between the sitting men laid a nondescript bottle, a lighter and a package of cigs. "Do you think I did the right thing, Fugaku?" A tired Minato asked his equally tired friend. The events of the last few weeks weighing down on them both. The first painful silence between friends, the question hung in the air next to the smoke of Fugaku's cigarette. Finally, the Uchiha broke the quiet, exhaling a steady stream of smoke. "You did right as Hokage. You did wrong as a father. The evidence still is only circumstantial. But who else could it have been? You don't accidentally steal the scroll of secrets. And Mizuki is dead. So is the infiltrator and that loyal Chunin that intervened. And we found proof of Mizuki's treason hidden in his apartment." "So you know." Fugaku halted his sentence, flicking away his cigarette butt as both men retreated into a pensive silence. "The treasonous act in conquered with a traitor, is that not proof of treason?" Naruto has been absolutely inconsolable. Minato began, wanting to change and yet not change the subject. She already was so shy and quiet. Now it's like she's sworn a vow of silence. "The most I've heard from her are clipped answers to mine or Kushina's questions and grunting when she is training yet again. God, she trains so much, it's insane." The blonde said, burying his head in his hands. "We all work through our grief in different ways." Fugaku replied, a twitch of his hand and a burst of chakra lighting up the tip of a new cigarette. "I'd say that training is healthier than reading smut or smoking," he said as a self-deprecating smile curled around his lips. "She's borderline obsessed. She's so serious all the time. Have you seen her recently? She dresses her hair and clothes just like Lady Mito. It looks like she stepped out of a history book. Sometimes I wonder if she ever has been a child at all. She just looks like a miniature princess." "They don't come with manuals, Minato. You did the best you could." Minato snorted. "Sometimes, your best is not good enough." A sad smile appeared on Fugaku's face, distant memories playing behind his eyes as he stared into nothingness. "Sometimes it is not." He agreed. Standing up, the Uchiha looked at Minato for the last time. "See you tomorrow." And with that farewell and a small burst of chakra, the fourth Hokage was alone with his thoughts again. The following day would not be softer on the young Hokage. The daily mission handing out was boring and, truth to be told, far below the capabilities of a Hokage. "I really should delegate this. At least the D ranks." And yet, he simply signed off on the A rank for the Jounin team in front of him. "Next." He called out. As he heard one team leave and another enter, he looked up. Their hair colors gave them away. Team 7. Bored and gray was Kakashi, shy and pink was Sakura, black and energetic was young Sasuke, and the stoic Redeed was his own daughter. Naruto. He looked each of them in the eyes, it was something he liked to do. The eyes are the window to the soul after all. 3 pair of them were as usual, bored attentiveness from Kakashi, eagerness from Sasuke and Sakura, but the last pair gave away nothing. Nothing positive nor negative, simply 2 empty dull holes without emotions. Weird. Yet Minato did not let the uneasiness mar his face. As he forced an easygoing grin on his face, he thrusted a mission scroll to Kakashi. "An easy one. Madame Shijimi's cat, Tora, has escaped. You guys are going to catch her and bring her back to Madame Shijimi. Got it?" The chorus of disbelieving shouts came from Sasuke and Sakura, while Kakashi simply nodded and Naruto simply stood there. "Worrying." Kakashi, ever observant, noticed something was off. With a practiced left hand he signed extra orders and a question mark at his Hokage. Minato simply let his eyes drift to Naruto, letting them rest on his daughter for a few moments. A completely normal thing to do for a parent, and yet, Kakashi noticed. The Cyclops' hand curled, affirmative, and then the team left. Minato sank into his chair for a moment, a deep sigh, letting the stress of interacting with his daughter out before calling out for the following group to come inside. Next. It had taken them the whole morning, but finally, Team 7 had captured Tora. After a quick delivery which his minions liked and the cat disliked, they now were sitting in the shade of one of the trees of the training ground. Both Sasuke and Sakura were digging into their takeout with gusto, while Naruto sat ramrod straight. And yet she seemed relaxed, an unnatural elegance gracing her features. So? Kakashi began, earning a few yelps in surprise from Pink and Raven. How do you rate your own actions on the very important mission we just did for the good of Konoha? As both Sasuke and Sakura started their rants, Kakashi's attention fell on Naruto. With one ear he heard his two enthusiastic students boast about how well they had done, even if they were filthy, sweaty and tired. Naruto on the other hand was clean, not a hair out of place, not a spat of mud on her clothes. My performance was acceptable. The mission was completed adequately, sensei. Ah, so this is what Minato was worried about. Flashed through Kakashi's mind. And oh Naruto, you did way better than us. Young Sasuke disagrees, it seems. Without you it would have taken way longer. The Uchiha exclaimed as he laid back and looked to the sky in a good attempt at imitating Anara. And you're pristine as well, your beautiful clothes aren't even dirty. Sakura added, a jealous undertone in her voice. You've got to teach me someday how you did that. And you have to tell me where you bought that kimono. A flicker of something came over Naruto's face before she forced it back in the perfect image of noble grace. Annoyance. I'll see when I have time, okay Sakura. Naruto deflected. Definitely annoyance. It seemed that was a good enough answer for Sakura, or she did not want to seem impolite. Why don't we end it here for today? You're all dirty from the mission and could use a bath. Time to go home, my cute little genin. Kakashi said as he stood up, his smile not visible but yet audible in his voice. As Sakura and Sasuke sprang upright and ran off, glad to be away from irritating chores, Naruto rose in a single movement. Not you, Naruto. She stiffened as she heard his voice. Kakashi's trained eye could see her body shift, tension being forced down, as she tried her best to not seem nervous. Is there anything, sensei? She asked, her voice almost breaking up halfway through under Kakashi's discerning gaze. Sakura annoys you, doesn't she? He asked. She is my teammate and I shall endeavor to work together as a team. As a team, but not as friends. And Sasuke, what do you think about him? With him, I also want to establish a working team dynamic. Team? Doesn't really sound like friends. It was a simple statement in Kakashi's typical simple and careless tone. And yet he could see her stiffen, her throat moving as Naruto attempted to swallow her surprise at being found out. I don't know what you're talking about, sensei. You should work on your acting. You might have fooled your teammates, but you'll need more than your current skills to fool me. Bingo. Like a deer in headlights she stiffened, eyes going wide. Kakashi was no mind reader, but he could make a good guess of what was going on inside her head. He squatted in front of her, lowering himself to her level as he looked into one of her eyes. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he tried to put her at ease. It's no crime to dislike your teammates. While Konoha places importance on teamwork, you can't be everyone's friend. Even in a village like ours. I'm not going to write this into your personal records or something like that. Just, please make at least one attempt to be their friend. And with those words, Kakashi jumped up into the trees and left, leaving a stumped Naruto behind. Naruto arrived home soon after her talk with her sensei. As a ninja should, she slipped out of her sandals in almost perfect silence, the rustling of shoes easily confused with the leaves in the trees outside. She made her way through the empty house before sliding the large glass door to the backyard open. Walking barefoot onto the grass, she found herself opposite to one of the training poles. She took a deep breath, the smell of dry earth filling her nostrils. And then she let loose. Anger came pouring forth, frustration translating into fanatical force as Naruto hammered away at the pole. Complex drills were reduced to practiced finesse as she did them again and again and again. She might not be the fastest or the strongest in Taijutsu, but she always had the best form. The better than the textbook form. Every movement was as smooth and economical as possible, not a drop of energy wasted as she went through movements she could do in her sleep and probably unconscious as well. Slowly but surely she could feel her anger-fueled endurance ebbing away. Muscles started to burn more than her emotions, her knuckles more raw than the truth sensei had heaped upon her. Why do I even need teammates? I'm the daughter of the Hokage, the fucking princess of Konoha. There is no genin that compares to me. I deserve a personal trainer. Sasuke and Sakura just hold me back. Sinking against the pole, she took a few deep breaths. Letting her head rest, eyes closed, the Redeed could feel her muscles turn to jelly. Seems I've overdone it. Deciding she had done enough physical work for the day, she slipped into the lotus position with ease. Closing her eyes and laying her hands down into her lap, she went through the different breathing exercises her mother had taught her. And then she reached for her chakra. It was as if she suddenly became aware of a body part, like feeling your tongue lying in your mouth. It's always there, but you do not always notice it. She coiled the energy and let it flow again. Flattened it and then kneaded it into a ball. While her taijutsu was fine, her ninjutsu powerful and her skill with kunai and shuriken accurate, this was the skill she was most proud of, even if she had not yet told anyone about it. Her mom would probably have a heart attack if she knew her daughter had been trying A-rank family techniques in her free time. A small grin broke out on her face before she whispered. Uzumaki family technique. Adamantine ceiling chains. And then she pushed with all her might. Pouring what seemed to be every single drop of chakra into the technique. After what seemed like an eternity, she opened her eyes to see her handiwork. Emerging from her chest was a wrist-thick chain, giving off an ethereal silver glow that would be quite impressive in the dark but fell flat in the sunny Konoha afternoon. Seems good. In truth, it was rare for an Uzumaki to unlock his or her chains before puberty. And Naruto went further than just unlocking. She was capable of summoning them at will, even if it was with serious effort and preparation. And she did it with only an old scroll she had taken from her mother. No coaching, no tips and tricks from an experienced user. Just dedication and natural genius. Letting her focus go, she could feel the chakra sliding back into her body. As the last link of the chain retreated into herself, she let out a sigh, the technique still taking a lot out of her. Standing up and walking back to the house, she stumbled in the first few steps but soon found her balance back. Dirty feet patted the polished wooden floors as Naruto plundered the pantry for an after-training snack. Still, she should be careful not to eat too much or make the house too dirty. After all, Naruto was not there anymore to take the fall of what she did. The soft knock on the window was merely politeness as Kakashi slid into the Hokage's office. A normal Chunin or Jounin would face a harsh reprimand for such breaking of protocol, but for people of Kakashi's caliber, protocol was merely a suggestion. And? The Jounin slouched into one of the chairs on the other side of the Hokage's desk. You shouldn't be too worried, Minato. Yeah, she's a bit asocial, but I was too and I turned out great. Minato looked up from the documents he was studying some construction request, his blue eyes giving a cold look from beneath his eyebrows. Yeah, I know. But she's not too bad. She's willing to work with her teammates, and that's more than I can say for some of your Jounin. I think Konoha just leaves her cold. I don't think she feels like she needs friends. And what would you suggest I do? Minato asked. Nothing, why? But Minato interrupted. Kakashi, that's my daughter you're talking about. Nothing. Now it was Kakashi's turn to interrupt. Holding up a hand to halt his old sensei, he continued. As I was saying, you can't really do anything. What was your plan, forcing her to make friends? You can order her to be polite and work together, but you can't force friendship. The truth hit hard and Minato seemed defeated by those words. Don't worry, if you put groups of people in life and death situations they become pretty good friends often. So it's just a matter of time in our profession. Minato seemed relieved. I hope you're right. Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 4. It had been a few days since Naruto joined up with the Tsukeuki. So far they had only traveled, but he had gleaned from the short conversations he had with a few of the other members of the nomadic clan that they would reach a small town in a few days and stay there for a while. But first they had to defeat the dusty roads. It had not rained in days and the sun radiated its angry rays without mercy. As Naruto broke out in another coughing fit, he could feel his throat and lungs burning. How do the others breathe with all this dust? He wondered. The voice behind him broke him out of his reverie. Trouble breathing, Naruto? Came the question as he could feel the smugness dripping from her voice. Fujiko caught up with him and kept pace with ease. As he looked up he could see that she wore some sort of veil. Seeing the question marks playing in his eyes, she replied. All of us got one of these. Very handy on these dusty trails. I'm sure you'd agree. The cough, before the blonde was able to reply, his voice creaking in the dust. Yeah, but I don't have a veil, maybe you'd noticed. Oh you poor soul. She laughed, giving him a friendly nudge. I've got one in reserve, wanted? She asked as she already reached for her bag. A nod was her answer and she pulled a loose cloth from her pack. It was a kind of ugly, spotty brown, but that was probably the reason it was her backup. I'll tie it up for now, I'll show you later how to do it yourself. Okay. A simple nod was the answer she received as she quickly bound the cloth around his face, years of experience evident in her confident movements. "Thanks," Naruto replied. They walked in silence for a while before Naruto opened his mouth again. "You know, this is the friendliest anyone here has yet been with me." He could see Fujiko's veil move with the sigh she had let out. "I'll be honest. You seem like a good boy, but that's all it is. Seem. Nobody here knows you. But nobody wants to talk to me. How am I supposed to get to know others if they don't want to talk to me?" Naruto's indignation stood out clear as day. "Well," Fujiko replied, "what did you talk to them about? Life on the road is harsh and we haven't got time nor money for luxuries like a city slicker like you is used to. It's pretty insulting if you ask someone who has never learned to read what his favorite manga is." Realization dawned on his face. Oh. I'm really sorry, I didn't mean it like that." He excused himself as shame blossomed on his cheeks. Don't worry about it. Little tip for next time, what people do is often a good subject." She hinted at him. Looking at the woman next to him, Naruto decided to take his chances. "So Fujiko, what exactly do you do here?" A short laugh came from the woman before she answered. "I'm head of the acquisitions team. You might have noticed, but you're not exactly in the noblest of company. We're a bit like you ninja before you settle down into villages. So I sneak into all types of places, try to get the treasures and artifacts, and then we make our escape and sell them. Decent money." "You thieves?" Naruto was shocked. He walked around with criminals. Criminals? What would mom think? And a whole other host of less than legal activities. "We're almost a traveling ninja village, but with less chakra tricks and aristocratic tradition and more stabby. Oh, I know some tricks and others do too, and Hiro's father was the one who started this all, and according to the rumors he was a missing nin." "Oh, don't look so shocked," she said as she saw his eyes widen to incredulous proportions. "You were training to do the same, if you were speaking the truth about training to become a ninja. Why did you even get banished?" Naruto looked to the side, not really wanting to talk about the touchy subject. "Come on, it's not like you can keep it a secret forever. You'd be surprised what kind of shit I've found myself in." "Well, so can the Vlemfinalixam into Intorticadentinus Latiscralbatitit for Lengthen got arrested and Tranatofkinaha. Wow, calm down and start from the beginning, I couldn't follow at all." A heavy sigh escaped Naruto's lips. "Well, so I'm not the most diligent student. I'm smart enough to read the book once and I know enough to pass the test. But the final exam was a bit harder than expected or something, because somehow I failed it. And some of the techniques we need to know are so boring. You can't even do anything with a basic clone. I'd rather learn the shadow clone. So after I failed the exams and I could have done the year over, but I really wanted to graduate with my sister so I was pretty bummed. But then one of the teachers, Mizuki, came to me and told me there was a secret test." Fujiko started to giggle next to him. "You know how stupid that sounds, right?" Yeah, laugh all you want, I know it sounds retarded. But at that time I was pretty emotional and I did it. So I had to steal a secret scroll and deliver it to Mizuki. It wasn't hard at all, the guards at the Hokage Tower knew me, so I just walked in, took it and left. And then you got caught." "Yeah, and apparently Mizuki was a traitor and saw his chance to use me to get the scroll. When I arrived at the meeting spot, there was a weird guy I'd never seen before and a dead Konoha. At that point I knew I had fucked up, but it was too late and Mizuki and the dude tried to kill him. Luckily my sister had noticed something was off so she came to get me. Don't know how she knew where the meeting spot was or how she found out something was up, but she was there pretty quick. And she was angry too, I've never seen her that mad. She threw one of Dad's Hiraishin kunai through Mizuki's throat and another through the weird guy. Double ace in the hole, my sister is really accurate with her kunai. Father teleported in, the police arrived not soon later. I got arrested, they found evidence that Mizuki was a traitor, the other dude was an infiltrator of Orochimaru. Everyone thought I was in cahoots with them and I got banished. That's quite the adventure. I've got a few questions if you don't mind." The question hung in the air, innocent and without obligation. "Sure, shoot," Naruto answered. "Do you think you could ace the test if you tried again?" "If I wasn't so lazy and had studied the day before I sure would have. I know the basics of the Rasengan, for God's sake." Naruto's eyes widened as he realized he had run his mouth bragging. "Yeah, sure." Fujiko replied, a disbelieving lilt in her voice. "Next question, do you trust your sister? What she did sounds pretty shady." Naruto almost shouted his answer, anger rising in his throat. "How can you even think that? She's my sister, I trust her with my life. The bonds of blood are sometimes not as strong as you think, but whatever makes you sleep at night." It seemed like Fujiko wanted to ask more questions, but she held back. It seemed like that last question had recalled some painful memories. Fujiko increased her pace and moved towards the front of the column. Their talk was over. The walking from the day was over and the camp had been raised for the night. Hiro had picked out a nice clearing in the woods, a bit from the road and next to a small stream. Most of the nomads used the last remaining hours of the day to have some free time. Naruto, on the other hand, was training. The scroll lying on the ground next to him, he lay on his back, foot placed to the roots of one of the trees. Channeling chakra to his feet, he tried to pull himself up, as his father had written in the scroll. Tree walking, the skill was called. Groaning in frustration as he hit the ground for the umpteenth time in the afternoon, he closed his eyes. And as soon as they were shut, he heard a voice and opened them again. "Training?" Fujiko asked. "I'd thought you'd learned wall walking in your academy." Naruto replied. "You get taught it after you make genin." "Want help?" she asked, seemingly in a good mood. "You know how to tree walk?" Naruto was surprised. "Yeah, well, we call it wall walking, but it's a pretty handy skill to get out of some of the situations we've found ourselves in before." She sat next to him, her voice taking on a commanding tone. "Show me how you try." As he channeled chakra to his feet, he could feel himself getting grip on the rough tree bark before making the first step, and then the second and then slip, a dull thud, and he laid on his back on the forest floor. He heard her think. "Well, the first thing you want to do is..." Night had fallen and a full moon shone over the calm camp. Little coals and burned-out campfires mirrored the twinkling of the stars above. Some were still awake, both willing ones who still talked with their friends and unwilling ones who had watch duty. Most still tried to rest, sleep coming easily to those who had been up and active a whole day. Naruto was tired. Very tired. Fujiko was a good but hard teacher. But now he could actually claim he understood the skill and what made it work and how to defeat it. Throughout all his attempts she had kept telling him small facts, how to disrupt others doing the technique, what kind of surfaces reacted weirdly, and so on. She had even said she would teach him water walking. As Naruto laid his head down on his backpack, pulling his blanket closer to his body in the rapidly cooling night, he suddenly heard a sound. And then it was quiet. For a moment, all small sounds of people talking around their campfire, the conversations of the night watch and so on halted. It was as if the entire camp took a deep breath. And then, far closer than was comfortable for the young blonde. Alarm. The cacophony was immense as people rolled out of their bedrolls, weapons were gathered, and the first sounds of violence started. Naruto, on his part, grabbed the kunai he had with him and sprang upright. In a few short moments, the entire camp was flooded by fighting, enemies streaming from the dark woods. The blonde looked around and in between struggling bodies saw a recognizable face. Fujiko. Locked and deadly 2-on-1. Racing to her aid, he threw himself shoulder first into one of her opponents. The man was surprised but as they tumbled to the ground, the blonde could feel a foot planted into his stomach and was thrown off as the man rolled into a crouch. Adrenaline forcing him to his feet, Naruto brandished his kunai and ran towards the enemy. The man, a broad-shouldered but rather small man with a long face and cropped brown hair, swung his tanto. A duck and roll and the blonde was at the man's side, slicing at his hip. Feeling something connect and hearing a grunt, he took a step back as the man started swinging his tanto wildly to force him back. The man pressed his free hand to his side and it came back shiny and slick with blood under the moonlight. "You'll pay for that, brat." The man rushed at him, an angry and aggressive overhead swing aimed at Naruto's head. But training had taken over and Naruto's body reacted as if it was a wooden sword in an academy spar. Dodge to the right, strike out with right. In a sick crunching noise he could feel his fist connect with the man's face. Just below his eye a large dark spot appeared. As the man roared in pain, he made another attempt on Naruto's life. Stabbing downwards, he attempted to skewer Naruto for the two painful hits the blonde had connected. But Naruto was well trained, his left hand shooting out and gripping the wrist before he slammed his right into the inner elbow. As the man's bicep contracted in pain, Naruto simply guided the tanto into the man's own stomach. It was over and Naruto had slain his first enemy. Tears were welling in his eyes, the shock of killing a guy sinking in. The rest of the battle was also clearing up. The enemy had counted on the element of surprise and the alarm had meant their attack was doomed from the very start. It had been a quick and decisive defeat. Naruto noticed Fujiko dispatching her own opponent before walking over to him. Wrapping him in her arms, she hugged him and started to whisper. "SHH, it's okay. You did good. You saved my life, don't worry about the other guy." Naruto, gallant as he was, vomited on her. Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 5. At exactly 6 in the morning, just before dawn, Naruto woke. It was a routine she had done as long as she could remember. Sometimes her brother had joined her, but as they got older he slept in more and more. Naruto on the other hand, held fast to her habits and went outside to do her morning warm-up. Starting with a series of stretches, she pushed herself further and deeper into the movements, forcing every last drop of sleepiness out of her muscles and tendons. Sufficiently warmed up, she started on her katas. Fists moving in slow motion, she forced precision and focus on her drowsy mind. As the sun started rising, she could hear Konoha awakening in the distance. She could also hear her mother calling out. "Honey, do you want the same as usual for breakfast?" Kushina called out from the porch. A simple and short yes was her answer as she could see her mother deflating for a moment before perking up again. The elder Reed went inside while the younger continued her exercises. At exactly 7 in the morning, Naruto ate. She always ate the same, a sharply calculated meal compromising all essential nutrients. Her mom had often bemoaned this, wanting Naruto to eat yummy things instead of the bland balancing act her daughter preferred. "Honestly, why do you never want anything else? I shudder just to think about eating the same every single morning. But I still love doing it for you, honey." A small smile appeared on Kushina's face as she thought about the outrageous demands her lost son had made every morning. She had sometimes indulged him, or maybe she indulged herself, when he demanded ramen. "This is fine, Mom." 4 short words. A clipped reply as always. Kushina looked away, suddenly more interested in the grain of the wooden tabletop. The attempted conversation had slipped into silence, which had become more and more common since Naruto was gone. "I'm going to take a shower now," Naruto said. Just a simple statement, a soft tone yet a harsh undertone. She had not excused herself, nor asked if she could take one. Her daughter had simply acted. As Kushina heard Naruto's soft footfalls ascending the stairs, she let her worried face rest in her hand. Naruto meanwhile jumped under an ice-cold shower, the thermic shock refreshing her muscles, while the water washed off the dust and sweat of her morning exercise. Exiting the shower, she dried herself off before tying her hair in the regal twin bun she copied off Lady Mito. She walked to her room and pulled out a set of finely made and expensive clothes before she dressed herself. Just as she was ready to leave, she took a quick look at herself in the mirror fixed to the wall. A smug, cold and cruel smirk played on her lips. Perfection. At exactly 8 in the morning, Naruto reported for duty. So Kakashi began as Team 7 entered the clearing of Training Ground 3. "Today I'm going to teach you the basics of a very important skill. You've seen other ninja walk on the walls and upside down, right?" "Do excited yes sensei s and a single bored nod later," he continued. "It's called tree walking, and you'll all need it if you ever want to pass the Chunin exams." This got the attention of all 3 of his little students. "Now look closely." Walking over to one of the trees, Kakashi channeled chakra to his feet and stepped up the tree. "I'm channeling chakra to my feet into the bark of the tree. You'll need to be careful, too much and you'll blow up the tree and too little and you'll just slide off." 2 intense nods and a confident one was the reply he got. "You're all smart kids, so y'all get it in no time. Now get to it." The amused tone betrayed that they would be trying for a long time before they got it. But being good and obedient students, all 3 walked to a tree and started to experiment. They kept trying and trying, each changing every single one of their attempts. Sakura was the first one that got a foot to stick, while Sasuke raced up the tree and reached the highest but slid back off. Naruto got somewhere in between, able to stick and walked up the tree for a short distance before sliding off again. The whole morning they trained until Kakashi suddenly returned, a mission scroll in his hand. The trio had not even noticed that he was gone. "I'm sorry, my students, but I got to put a stop to your diligent training." The exasperated expressions on Sakura and Sasuke's faces told him that they were glad, while Naruto's eyebrows furrowed in annoyance for a moment. "I've got a mission, and that means you've got a mission as well," Kakashi said, and acted joy dripping from his voice. Sasuke's eyes beamed. "Really? Are we going to do a really cool mission with you, sensei? Not like catching cats or painting fences?" "No. I'm doing something real quick for the Hokage, and you guys are going to." He paused for a second as he pulled open the scroll and let his lone eye drift over the text. "You're going to babysit the Enomoto kid. Have fun." As he threw the scroll into Sasuke's hands, the Jounin jumped into the trees and disappeared. The mission went relatively well, on account of the fact that babies needed someone to watch over them, but they did not need constant interaction. Mostly the Enomoto kid just slept. If the little kid woke up, it was because he was hungry, which was relatively easy to remedy. But this time, he had a full diaper. "Naruto, can you do it?" Sakura asked hesitantly. "Both me and Sasuke have fed him, and you haven't done anything yet." Naruto looked up from the scroll she was reading, some introduction on basic poisons used in Suna and how to remedy them. A single look from her eyes and Sakura was almost certain this was going to be a problem. When Naruto opened her mouth, all remaining doubt was removed. "No." "But Naruto, you haven't done anything on this mission. You need to do it." "No." Naruto replied, her tone taking an irritated lilt. "Naruto," Sakura begged, when suddenly Naruto shot upright. "I am not changing a diaper. Such plebeian things are beneath me." Do it yourself, Haruno the Redeed hissed, indignation dripping from her voice as she tilted her head slightly upwards, giving the illusion of looking down on her pink-haired teammate. The emphasis on Sakura's civilian name only deepened the insult. Don't act as if you are the daimyo's daughter, Naruko. Sasuke admitted. And in a flicker of temporary maturity, he added. We'll always have to do dirty missions, we're ninja after all. I'm the Hokage's daughter, I'm the best genin Konoha has to offer, I'm in Uzumaki, and that is below my dignity. She replied, a haughty tone inflecting her voice as she pointed at the baby. The volcano known as Sasuke, normally dormant, could not but explode. God, why are you such a bitch, Naruto? Naruto was my best friend and you're nothing like him. I'd wish I had him on my team instead of you. You might be smart and strong, but you're so damn arrogant all the time. The silence was rather refreshing. As if a particularly heavy burden was lifted from their collective shoulders. And then Naruto just dropped it back on them. It's not arrogance if it's true. I am the best genin after all. Sakura, take care of the child. Naruko commanded, her icy tone accepting nothing else but absolute obedience to her commands. Sakura, stunned by the emotional outburst of Sasuke, mutely went to change little Enomoto's diaper. Dinner time had come and passed, and Naruko was now holed up in her father's home office. She was rather irritated with her team, and something had to be done about them, in her opinion. That's where her father came in. He was Hokage after all, and could perfectly put pressure on her teammates. And that was why she was preparing to ambush her father as he came home. But how to best approach this? She was simply too old for the teary-eyed sad little girl method. Just as she heard the key in the front door turn, she had planned out how she would act. As her father entered his home office to drop off the last of the day's paperwork, she acted. Dad, she began hesitantly. You said I could come to you with anything, right? Yeah, sure, honey. Minato replied as he moved to embrace her. You can tell me anything, my daughter. Well, you know how I try to be really polite to everyone and how I try to work with my team. Yeah, I do. Did something happen with your teammates? Why, yeah, the girl nodded. I did something wrong and Sasuke went off on this tirade about how he had rather had Naruto on his team. And Sakura took his side because she's jealous of me and my skills and my beauty and everything. Can you do something about them? Please, daddy. She asked as she looked up from between his arms. Minato merely sighed. I'll see what I can do, okay? He replied. Now it's time for you to go to bed. Sleep tight, honey. And with those words, the blonde nudged his daughter towards the door. But the thanks and a smile so wide it showed her pearly whites, yet which failed to reach her eyes, she bounced off to bed. Minato let out a sigh before walking to the window. Opening it, he jumped into the treetops and soon was underway towards Kakashi. After Minato dropped into Kakashi's pitch-dark apartment, he simply started talking. It was something he did relatively often. If Kakashi was home, he would get a reply and advice. If he was not, then Minato had a moment to think over the arguments he had just vocalized. Naruko just came to me and told me Sasuke had insulted her despite her greatest effort. I believed little of her words. There obviously was some altercation, but I doubt someone as gentle as Sasuke, Mikoto's little boy, would have started it. Their teamwork is worse than it has ever been. With a sigh, Kakashi laid down his icha on his stomach, hands resting behind his head. Looking up from his position on the couch, he replied. Yeah, it's not getting any better. Naruko might be a tad arrogant. Even more so than I was. That earned a raised eyebrow from Minato, before Kakashi continued. I quote her directly here, such plebeian things are beneath me. Do you think someone with that attitude can work with others? Minato facepalmed as he felt a headache coming. Where have I failed with these kids? As he sat down on the coffee table next to Kakashi, he brainstormed out loud. I can maybe reshuffle the teams, see if she can fit in another group. There is no genin who would take that kind of talk, except for maybe a Hyuga branch member. And both of us know the trouble that is that Neji boy and your personal vendetta with the Hyuga. I suggest once more the life or death situation. God damn, Kakashi, I'm not sending a team of fresh genin into a known life or death situation. Do you know how bad that looks? Even if they return without a scratch, it will still look as if Konoha has a massive manpower shortage. Both men knew that was a bad look to the outside, clients preferring the illusory promise of the best and brightest for their very special mission, while other nations would smell blood. And internally it would look like the village was in decline. Not a good look for a Hokage. There's that escort to wave mission. How do you even know that? Minato bit out before continuing with a sigh. You're lucky you're my student and you're that good of a ninja, otherwise you'd get a reprimand for that. Kakashi merely shrugged in response. Nothing reported except for possible bandits. But it's likely there will be enemy ninja resistance. Another shrug from Kakashi. Nothing I cannot handle. Minato sighed once more. Make it seem like one of the genin begged for it, understood? But those words, the Hokage jumped back towards his home. Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 6. The camp had not gone back to sleep after the ambush. Not only was there a very real possibility and danger of a second attack, but also very few are capable of sleeping while adrenaline is racing through their veins. A good life or death situation is better than coffee after all. And there was a lot to do as well. After having his wounds looked at, Naruto followed Fujiko around. As they went around the camp, she decided which things the two of them should look at now and which could wait until later. They had already rescued one tent that had collapsed on the ashes of a nearby campfire. It was not seriously damaged by fire or heat, but it was better to save it than let the possibility exist that it would yet ignite. And now, they knelt down at one of the corpses. Naruto looked rather queasy, but Fujiko tried to comfort him. "Naruto, I know you don't like this. Nobody does, really. You just get used to it. I'll take care of the body, but you need to watch. Someday you might need to do this yourself, okay?" The blonde did not look like he agreed, but he still replied with a slow nod. "First, you check the body and check if it is really dead. If it isn't, you need to be merciful and end them." Two raised blonde eyebrows and a shocked grunt disagreed. Fujiko sighed. "Don't know if you've noticed, but we don't really have the medical capabilities to treat these kinds of wounds. If you don't stumble away at the least, you probably won't make it. And it's nicer to make it a quick end than to slowly bleed out. Or be buried alive, that's even worse." Naruto swallowed slowly, the idea alone making him nauseous. "Does that happen often?" Naruto asked, a shudder evident in his voice. "Don't know, I've always ended them. And I haven't experienced it myself, but you might have noticed that. So, after you've made sure they're dead, you look over their body, see if you find any insignia or so. You know the major ninja village symbols." This time, his response was a quick nod. "Good. If you see any symbols that you don't understand, don't hesitate to ask. There are many samurai orders and minor clans and even gangs who have their own insignia. You learn most of them through exposure and experience. After that, you strip the body up to the underwear." "Isn't that desecration of the dead?" Naruto asked as Fujiko went through every nook and cranny of the body's clothes in rapid tempo. "As long as you don't try to defigure the corpse or do things you'd find humiliating, you can take his stuff. It's not like they'll need it anymore, so it isn't even theft." Fujiko replied, a smirk forming on her face. "When you do this, make sure to look through all his pockets. Throw the gear and the possessions on a pile, we'll sort them later. Now I need your help to carry the corpse. Hold his legs please." Naruto did as requested and slowly the pair hobbled with the body towards the rim of the camp. Moving outside of the circle of tents, they threw the body on a growing pile. As they returned towards the pile of gear they had left behind, Fujiko started to lecture him. "We sort the corpses into two piles, ally and foe. Our allies, friends and foes get a decent grave, while we throw the enemy in a big pit. Our time isn't infinite and we need to make choices." The blonde nodded as they crouched over the pile of gear and Fujiko started to inspect it. "First of all money, gold and jewelry, goes into the big pile of the group, which then gets divided among our members. The rest, like weapons, clothes and assorted items are yours to keep if you want. Clothes are the hardest because often they are damaged and the wrong size. Most other stuff you already have and you can't carry everything with you." "And what if I don't know if something is clothes or jewelry?" "Honest huh?" She smiled. "Well then you come to me or the boss and ask what you need to do," she said as she sorted through the gear. Bundling most of it, she thrusted it towards Naruto. "Here, it's his road gear. He had a particularly nice canteen with a very interesting cooling seal on it. I'd rather have it myself, but you did very well, so you can have it." Naruto looked over the rest of the rough stack. Another bag, some kind of blanket or parka, and a utility knife. And a tanto. Naruto's eyes widened as his hand drifted towards it. Grabbing the handle, he slid it out of its sheath, the well-maintained blade reflecting the last rays of the twilight moon. "Boys and their toys." Fujiko smirked as she saw Naruto's attention drift. "I'm sure there are some who can teach you the basics if you want to learn. Now, I'm going to take this to Hiro." She gestured towards the money in her hand. "It would be best if you tried to sleep for a few more hours. You'll need it tomorrow." Attention fixed on the shiny new blade, Naruto walked back to his sleeping bag with his new gear. Tomorrow he would take care of it. As the sun rose over the camp and its golden rays spread across the clearing, Naruto woke once more. With a grunt he pulled himself upright, rested and yet still tired. Trying to rub the sleep out of his eyes, he took a careful look around. Some tents had already been disassembled, while in front of others people were still eating breakfast, and others still were silent, their occupants still sleeping. Rolling up his Spartan sleeping arrangement, Naruto looked through his backpack for something to eat. Finding one of the remaining ration bars, he grabbed his new gear and took off for the small stream, planning to inspect and clean his new stuff and maybe wash up himself. ration bar between the teeth, towel rag over his shoulder and arms filled with items. He sat down on the riverbank. The first few items were nothing special, but had to be cleaned first before he would even attempt to use them. Who knows what that dude has done with them? Second to last, the canteen. It was a nice, though slightly dented and clearly used item. It was made of some kind of metal, stainless steel, the blonde guessed. The edges had worn slightly, shiny metal peeking from beneath a matte gray paint job. On its bottom something was etched, done with rough tools, yet clearly someone had paid attention while doing it. So this is a cooling seal. Doesn't look like anything mom or dad have ever shown me. I think that might be wind, and that looks like an inverted fire element. Weird. He traced his finger over the lines for a last time before he shifted his attention to the tanto. In the daylight it seemed like less of a mighty weapon and more of a basic tanto. Still, it was Naruto's first spoils of war and it filled him with a giddy feeling, something excitable tickling at the bottom of his spine. As he looked over the blade, he noticed something scratched out. Inspecting it closer, it looked like the symbol of Kumo, but carefully etched away. So the dude he took this from was a rogue Kumo ninja or had taken down one himself. Cool. Naruto finished the last of his ration before he slipped out of his clothes, sliding into the water. The water was cold but refreshing and the blonde quickly scrubbed off the worst of the grime. Pulling his new gear into the water, he paid every part attention as he cleaned it out to the best of his ability. Done with both his stuff and himself, Naruto crawled out of the stream, drying himself off before putting his old clothes back on. It was not the cleanest thing to do, but he had little choice. It seems I've had so little to choose these last few days, and yet, I feel like I'm more free here than in Konoha. Walking back to the camp, he decided to look for someone who would teach him the tanto. He would learn something, not because the teachers at the academy told him to, but because he wanted to. It seemed like the reward for fighting was not just new stuff, but also a measure of acceptance. Mind you, Naruto was not yet everyone's best friend, but people did not try to write him off as some kind of stray dog begging for scraps. As he went from person to person, he was not rejected because they did not like him, but because they seemingly had no skill with the tanto. He had received all kinds of offers to train in many different skills from different people. But not yet the tanto. Naruto was almost out of options until he decided to talk to Hiro. "So, you've finally come to me, huh?" the man said as he looked Naruto up and down, almost appraising him. "Yeah, is there nobody among the Tsukeuki who can teach me the tanto?" The man laughed before replying, a smile still playing on his lips. "Of course there are many. The majority knows how to handle him or herself with the tanto. Then why did no one want to teach it to me?" Naruto's eyebrows furrowed in irritation and confusion. "Because I told them that I'd teach you and ordered everyone to leave it to me. The attack last night was aimed at Fujiko, and you saved her. You're in our debt for that, and as head of the clan I need to fulfill that debt. I'll repay you by ensuring you won't cut off your hand with that sharp steel," Hiro said, a hand clasping Naruto's shoulder. "Besides, you've got talent for fighting, I've heard from Fujiko. Taking you in was a good idea, I knew it. I only have good ideas. But you didn't want to take me in." Naruto's confusion was part honest and part humoring. Hiro simply laughed. It wasn't malicious, it was as if Naruto had just told him a very funny joke. "You're right of course, but you'll need to remember that as boss I only have good ideas, understood?" Now Naruto too broke out in a smile. "Whatever you say, boss." It had been a long day of walking, although Naruto had earned a place for his stuff on one of the carts. Along the road, he had talked with some of the people of the clan about a multitude of subjects. Well, mostly listening for Naruto, as one pointed out the geography of the mountain chain he could see lying in the distance towards the west, while others talked about their personal areas of expertise. From poison to seduction, to fraud and scams, to knowing how to entertain a fighting pit's public. Naruto learned a ton of stuff as he walked along the road. And now, since they had stopped for the night, Naruto was training with Hiro. "So, today I'd like to do the basics of the basics. I'm sure you'll get them rather quickly. You already know some footwork, and I've seen you handle kunai, so it'll be over before you know it." Hiro was right, it did not take long before Naruto stood in front of him, tanto held fast but not gripped too tight, feet slightly wider than shoulder width, and a dynamism evident from his relaxed posture. The older man took out a tanto of his own and stood opposite to Naruto. In slow motion, he started to go through a chain of movements, which the blonde tried to mirror. Time and time again, and every attempt went better than the last. Suddenly, Hiro stopped. "Keep practicing, today or tomorrow. I'll notice when you're ready and we'll move on to the next step." And then the man was gone, leaving a slightly confused Naruto behind. The young blonde simply shrugged and continued, practicing until he felt comfortable. It would be a while before he could use it in battle, but he was sure that one day he would be a decent swordsman. Now, time for tree walking. The blonde thought as he walked to a grove not far from the camp. Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 7. Team 7 walked up to the mission room at the Hokage Tower. It had become a bit of routine for its members. Wake up, meet up, get a mission and train. Repeat. And most of them were okay with it. Except for one very ambitious girl. Naruko Uzumaki wanted something more than a D rank. And she was making it clear to her team. So I'm going to ask the Hokage for a harder mission, maybe there is a C rank we can do. And you guys are going to stand by me when I ask, right? Both Sasuke and Sakura looked not very sure about that. Kakashi, on the other hand, just deflected her demands. We'll see what the Hokage has for us, Naruko. He replied, ruffling the Riteed's hair even as she glared at him for messing up her intricate haircut. As they entered the office, Naruko's tone switched completely. Wiping the angry look off her face and replacing it with a soft smile, she skipped up to the desk. Can we get something else than a D rank? Please. Please. Her teammate stood in stunned silence, the shock of a polite Naruko, as if the sky had suddenly turned green. Minato chuckled before making eye contact with Kakashi and receiving a subtle nod in return. Well, since you are asking so nicely and since your teammates aren't objecting, maybe there is something I can have you do. Swift hands plucked a scroll from the pyramidal heap next to his desk, leaving a small hole where the roll used to be. I've got a C rank here that you might be able to do. There are rumors of bandits in the area, so you'll need to think about that. The words had not yet left the blonde's mouth or Sakura's eyes went as wide as saucers as she stammered. BB bandits? Are. Before she could finish her fear, Naruko interrupted her. We'll take it of course. She said as a bright smile played around her lips but did not seem to reach her eyes. You'll need to let your teammates finish their sentences, honey. Sakura, you were saying. As Sakura opened her mouth to continue, Kakashi dropped a hand on her shoulder. I think they're more than capable of taking on bandits. If there is trouble I'll take care of it. Sakura seemed reassured by the confidence of her sensei. Sasuke too did not voice any opposition, content to just wait and see. The Hokage looked at them and spoke. So you'll be escorting a bridge builder to the country of Wave. You'll guard him until he finishes the bridge. It's expected to take about 2 weeks, so pack enough gear. The blonde sunk into a pensive silence for a moment before he continued, this time talking to one of the scribes sitting in the background. Aji, can you get to Zuna? The bridge builder. The unnamed Chunin jumped up and only moments later he was back, a rather grumpy man following him. As the man took in the genin, his eyes narrowed. It seemed like he wanted to say something, but the Hokage was first. This will be your client. Tazuna. You can get to know him later, you'll spend the next 2 weeks with him. Now chop chop. He said as he shooed Team 7 out of his office. Before anyone else could speak, Kakashi took the word, a rare seriousness in his tone. Team, get your gear, we'll meet at the gate in about an hour. Pack food and clothes for a week, I'm sure we can resupply and wash up somewhere halfway. I'll take care of Tazuna in the meanwhile. As the 3 genin took off to take care of their supplies, Kakashi turned towards Tazuna. And we are going to have a nice talk, aren't we, Tazuna? The Jounin's tone allowed no dissent and Tazuna only let out an audible swallow at the prospect. Something has happened between Tazuna and Sensei. Naruko thought as she observed their client. The man seemed like a really verbose person in the mission room and as soon as the mission started, he did not even look at them. Even worse, he was clearly avoiding their gaze, as if making eye contact with them was cursed. Either Sensei or Dad dressed him down. But why would they do that? What could it be? She mulled as they walked down the dirt road that Tazuna said would lead them to Wave. They walked in a standard diamond formation around their client, Sasuke taking point, Sakura to the left, Naruko to the right and Kakashi to the back. It was not the best formation for conversation, certainly since Tazuna stonewalled every attempt from Sakura to make small talk. But it suited Naruko just fine, she had no grievances that needed listening to. And then Kakashi tensed slightly. It was only minor, but Naruko knew her sensei. Ever since she was young, he came over sporadically to babysit if both mom and dad were busy. It was a slight nudge in his posture, shoulders pulling back just slightly. She had only seen it once, when her baby brother had grabbed at some of the kunai her dad had left lying around. And now, there was something else that her sensei had seen that took his attention like a 4-year-old playing with knives did. What could it be? How come I haven't noticed anything? And then the chain came. Like lightning, it flashed across the road, wrapping around their sensei. As the momentum of the chain slung what seemed to be Kakashi into the woods, 2 men appeared. Their headbands declared them proud ninja. Not hesitating for a moment, they charged the genin. Naruko was the first to recuperate from the shock as she pushed Tazuna into Sakura and both of them into the shrubs lining the road. Sasuke ducked and rolled, dodging a second vicious chain. Now it was her and Sasuke against 2 enemies of unknown capacity. Stall, I need to know, I need more time. Her brother was good at on-the-fly improvisation. Naruko? Not so much. It was one of the few things he did better and she found it humiliating to admit. Not even an introduction. I'd like to know who I will force to eat dust. She said, trying to elicit a furious response. One of the duo merely chuckled while the other took the word. Arrogant huh? Tell death or whoever brings your soul to the afterlife that the demon brothers, Gozu and Maizu, sent you. And with that sneer, he swung his wicked-looking claw at her. Naruto jumped backwards as the two moved in on her, trying to box her in as one came from the left and the other from the right. Behind them, she could see Sasuke grab a pair of kunai before her teammates stormed at their backs. Sasuke no. Naruto shouted, less afraid of him getting hurt as the pair was clearly fainting, but more that she did not want to share the glory of her first takedown with him. Copying Sasuke's actions, she too pulled out a pair of kunai and made an attempt to attack. In a flash it was over. Of course it was brushed off with ease. Both of the genin ended up on their ass, kunai lying somewhere in the dirt. But now they stood next to each other. Naruto, we need to work together. Sasuke whispered as he pulled himself upright. Yeah, we don't have a choice. Together. How accurate are you with your shuriken and wire? The Redeed replied, hair tousled and brow sweaty. Sasuke grabbed at his pouch, fishing out a pair of shuriken tied together with a length of ninja wire. Evidently, Naruto had some kind of a plan. Decent enough. You think you can throw one through the links of their chain and have it come back? She asked. A nod was his reply as realization dawned on his face. Turning around, he threw the shuriken towards the duo. It looked like the throw of a scared genin, missing the pair without them needing to dodge. But the fact was. Gotcha. As the little metal star whirred up and around the pair, the glint of a thin but strong wire could be seen. As the shuriken returned, Sasuke grabbed it and pulled. It was something the two did not expect. Their whole fighting style was carefully unbalanced to give the other as much space as possible. Usually when someone tried to grab the spike chain, it was a very visible and dangerous attempt. After all, grabbing the chain would put you in between two very angry missing nin. But not this time, and so Sasuke pulled both of them off their feet as Naruto advanced. She grabbed another pair of kunai and threw them as hard as she could. As the knives flew, the pair collided, courtesy of getting pulled. The kunai dug into their chest, not a mortal wound by any means, but a massive disadvantage. But they would not yet give in. As they tried to disentangle themselves, Naruto found herself dangerously close. As soon as she saw the chain detach and one of the vicious claws reach for her, she heard Sasuke call out. Naruto. Duck. Fire release. Great fireball technique. Sasuke spat out, finishing the chain of hand seals. As she moved to obey the command, she could feel the blaze of a massive fireball passing over her. The orb of heat washed over the pair. Slightly charred, the technique had done decent damage to them, and while they were down and out for the count, they were not dead yet. Time to rectify that. Naruto stood up and grasped for yet another kunai. As she neared the downed pair, she could feel her fingers twitching around the knife. A pleased smile curled around her lips as she stood over the men. So-called demon brothers huh? You'll fit right in with the devil when you meet him in the afterlife. She spat as the knife descended on the first defenseless man. A deadly wound, she had pierced one of the man's arteries in his neck. As she raised her knife to strike at the second man, she felt a hand clasp around her wrist. That is enough, Naruto. She dropped the kunai as she felt the pressure on her wrist increase. Kakashi was here and he was not very happy. Kakashi had sent her to look for Sasuke, Sakura and Izuna while he took care of the remaining demon brother. As she moved off the road, she saw the three of them sitting behind a tree. Sasuke did not look any worse for the wear, and the other two only had a few scratches from when she had pushed them into the shrubs. They had been talking about something, but fell silent as Naruto sat next to them. The silence stretched for a moment before Sakura could not handle it anymore. Is Sensei taking care of them? Yeah, he is. Are you all okay? It was a rhetorical question, yet she still received a round of nods. And then the silence fell until Kakashi broke through the leaves. So, we have to talk. It was a tone the genin had seldom heard, but it filled them with dread. First, the good things. You've mostly done as I expected. Naruto, Sasuke, good job on taking care of them. Then he looked at Naruto, his single eye frigid. Naruto. We do not execute prisoners. We secure them and have the interrogation division pick them up. You should have known that. I'll make sure to tell your father. You can't do that, I took care of an enemy. I took down 2 Chunin, I should be rewarded. She exploded, her face and hair red in anger, the public dressing down a bridge too far. If Kakashi was cold before, now he was positively arctic. Girl. It was you and Sasuke. You did not take 2 Chunin out alone. 2 Chunin I cast a Jinjutsu on to make it easier for you guys. Do not think for a moment you're that good, you arrogant little brat. He waited for a moment, letting the words sweep in. We will have another talk about this, later. For now it's time to go. he continued, rising to his feet. Naruto could feel her anger rising at being written off like that, a rebuttal already fresh on the tongue, but the persistent glare from Kakashi made her back down. Whatever. Let's go, no need to linger here any longer. And with that, Naruto was gone from the roadside shrubs and was back on the road. Betrayed and Banished. Chapter 8. So I was told to report to you, Fujiko. Something about a mission? Naruto asked as he walked towards the young woman. They had been camping on the outskirts of a small town for a few days and would be doing so for at least a few more. Hiro had sent out different groups of men with different tasks as the rest of the group took a breather from the nomadic life. That's true. You've got your stuff with you? She asked, eyes roaming over his body. Yeah, I've got all my stuff. Can you tell me what I'm supposed to do? Not yet, walk with me. She replied before stalking off towards the outer edge of the camp, the furthest part from the town. She nodded towards two other men who shot upright and joined them. As they left the camp, Fujiko went off-road and the others followed her. Only when they reached the woods, she started to talk again. A few weeks ago, one of the local lords got into an altercation with another lord. Neither wanted to apologize, so it escalated into a cold war. There are ruins of an old shrine on one of the lord's lands. It's rumored to hold ancient treasures, but the lord is afraid of taking them out. Normally it's guarded, but Hiro suspects the guards have been pulled back because of the conflict. We're supposed to go and explore the shrine, acquiring anything worthwhile. Understood. The two other men gave affirmative grunts, but Naruto had more questions as he barraged Fujiko with his inquiries. Why me? How far is it? For how long are we gonna be away? Fujiko sighed and started to reply. It's 2 days going, so we're gone for at least a week. We've got a month's time to rejoin the group while they continue traveling, if something were to happen. And I've picked you because you need to start doing your part. This will probably be an easy mission, so a perfect introduction to earning your bread. Now, I will be the team leader. If I tell you to jump, you don't even ask how high, I expect you to jump immediately. Tetsu and Haranobu will join us. Fujiko said, pointing to the two men as she named them. They look like the average Ronin, clothes patched again and again, well used but cared for, weapons dangled on their hips. Now follow me, we've got a long way ahead of us. Naruto almost walked into Fujiko's arm as she signaled them to stop. It was the second day of their little expedition and they had been marching from sunrise, Fujiko leading them into a pace that many civilians would call murderous. Yet for the four, it was a simple effort. Fujiko spoke first. I think that's it. She said, pointing to 3 walls and half a roof on the top of the next hill, a traditional torii entrance bleached of its red painted color. The weathered walls that remained standing only showed parts of the brightly painted murals that once decorated the walls of the shrine. Looks like nobody's there. Tetsu remarked. Yet we should remain vigilant. Any idea on how to handle this, boss? We'll circle the shrine once at about the same distance we are now. Look for any tracks of someone recently arriving or leaving or simply being in the area. Afterwards we'll take a closer look. Her subordinates, including Naruto, nodded as they began their reconnaissance. As they circled the ruins, they soon came across a disused gravel pathway. Fujiko lifted her hand, ordering the others to stop for a moment. Then she spoke up. Naruto, what would you do now? Surprised by the question, Naruto thought for a moment. If anyone comes to check on the shrine, they'll probably come from this direction. So we'd better add some tripwire that warns us if someone is coming. Indeed. Do you know how to set a tripwire? Yeah, we learned that in the academy. Good. Set 1 and Haranobu will evaluate how you did. Tetsu and I will continue our reconnaissance and we'll move to the shrine afterwards. Come to us if you see us at the shrine. But those words, Fujiko left, Tetsu trailing in her wake. As Naruto looked at Haranobu, the bulky man gave a shrug and motioned for Naruto to begin. Pulling out a roll of ninja wire, Naruto wound it between a pair of trees that flanked the path. Nimble fingers made quick work of the knots and ties, and soon an almost invisible wire hung over the path, connected to a bag of stones that would drop on a hollow log when it was tripped. Haranobu, who had been watching the blonde work in silence, looked over the contraption in appraisal. He spoke the first words Naruto had ever heard him say. Good. Fujiko and Tetsu are waiting for us. With those words, he turned around and left, walking towards the shrine. As Haranobu had said, the others were indeed waiting on the two. Standing in front of what had once been a door, but now just were the remains of a rotting wooden frame and rusty hinges. Beyond that, treasures awaited the young adventurer. So, we're here mostly for treasure and rare artifacts. Keeping the current state of the shrine in mind, I doubt there will be anything else that is worth our while. Tier incense has rotted away like the wood, I doubt offerings have recently been made. Should you find a bottle of vintage sake, then I'm sure we can all agree that we won't tell Hiro we found it. Understood. Before they could reply, Fujiko turned on her heel and marched inside of the shrine. The other two followed before Naruto finally decided to follow his temporary boss as well. As he walked into the shrine he felt a wave of calm coming over him. The late afternoon sun was casting its rays through the many holes in the building, while vines dangled from the rafters and roof while dripping water. In the distance, birds were chirping as the smell of moss hit Naruto's nostrils. Tetsu had immediately broken off to the left, a lock chest piqued his interest as he tried to force the lock with his knife. Haranobu was just wandering around, his eyes roaming over the art while Fujiko walked towards the altar. Naruto, not knowing what to do, decided to walk up to her. As Fujiko saw him approaching, she motioned for him to help her. Almost all of these smaller shrines have some spot where treasures are buried to please the spirit of the shrine. Often it's under the altar. Be a good boy and help me move it. Naruto did as he was told, and together they moved the altar from its spot with a bit of effort. Fujiko immediately sank to a knee and traced a finger around the edge of a large rectangular stone. Naruto could hear a soft bingo whispered under her breath. Pulling out a long, slender blade, she slipped it into the seam and cleaned out years of dirt and grime. A bit of moving around and soon the littlest of motion was noticeable in the stone. Naruto stood and watched as Fujiko's experienced fingers somehow found purchase along the edge of the stone and tilted the entire slab upwards like a trapdoor. Underneath, darkness loomed. Huh, it's bigger than I expected. Seeing the confusion on Naruto's face, Fujiko explained. Most of these shrines have a rather small space for a few treasures. But this is unexpectedly large. It kind of looks like a whole room. She said, as her face pulled into a frown. And is that a bad thing? Naruto asked. Depends. A bigger room means more treasure, if there is any, but it can also have some nasty surprises. Seeing the question look in the young teen's eyes, Fujiko continued. Someone could be buried there, or a minor evil spirit could be sealed here, the shrine acting as either a memorial or a ritual space to strengthen the seal every so often. Of course, it could be both. Moving the stone further away, Fujiko pulled out a spool of ninja wire. Tying it around the stone, she lifted the entire thing up and threw it through the hole in the wall, making sure that the stone would not suddenly slide away. Then she threw the rest of the ninja wire down into the gaping abyss. She grabbed it and let herself rappel down into the underground room. Channeling a bit of fire chakra to her thumb, Fujiko turned it into a substitute torch. Humming. She called out to Naruto, who still was watching her prepare for a dive into possible catacombs. It took a few moments for Naruto, but soon he replied, calling out. Yeah, I'm coming, give me a moment. Grabbing the ninja wire, the blonde two slid down into the underground room. As he slowly descended, his eyes roamed over the room and all that the light of Fujiko's chakra torch revealed. One side of the room glittered, gems and gold reflecting the light in the otherwise dark room. And then he turned around, and a fear gripped his heart. A granite coffin stood on the other side, seals carefully engraved into every surface. Fujiko stood right next to it, enthralled but careful enough to not touch it. What is it? Naruto asked, shocking Fujiko out of her reverie. I think it's the coffin of a very strong but evil warlord who the people feared would return from the dead and take his revenge. See these seals. I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure they look like some sort of chakra restraints. Naruto stepped closer and tried to decipher the seals. I doubt it's a dead dude inside of there. It looks more like some sealing experiment. Honestly, it is kind of interesting. I recognize the chakra and there are the lines that lock it up. I can see what you mean with chakra restraints, but it doesn't look like any I've seen. It looks a lot like restraints, yeah, but it has no aspect for restraining will. And a coffin for a dead guy would at least have something to honor death. This is something different. Looking up from his reverie, he saw Fujiko staring at him, her eyes wide in confusion. How do you know all that stuff? I'm good with seals, and I barely understand what it is all about. A slightly awkward grin crept on Naruto's face as he scratched the back of his head. I'm an Uzumaki, you know. Mom and Dad taught me and my sister ever since I could read. But those words, Naruto suddenly recalled all that he had left behind and his smile disappeared, enthusiastic eyes growing dim with sadness. Fujiko moved closer and threw an arm around him, giving him a hesitant shoulder pad and searching for words that might comfort the blonde she grew fond of. If they were here, I'm sure they would be proud of you recognizing these seals so quickly. But I don't. Naruto almost shouted. I recognize some parts, but the whole thing is just weird. It's like someone tried restraining chakra from air. Only living things have chakra. Well then, why don't you copy this seal to a scroll and research it later? I'm sure I can hoist the treasures back there all on my own. And that's an order. With a last pat on the shoulder, Fujiko turned around and started filling a bag with all kinds of coins, jewels and other precious goods. Naruto simply focused on the granite mystery in front of him. It had grown dark and yet they were not finished. Against one of the outside walls they had put up a few tents, while a small fire crackled inside of their midst, while Harinobu tried to make a stew from some ration bars, spices and a rabbit he had caught. The rest was discussing their gains. That chest took me ages to get open, and it had nothing good inside of it. Just some moldy robes and prayer scrolls. Tetsu lamented as he looked through the bags. Fujiko had already moved out of the underground room. The treasure vault had some nice goods. I think Hiro will be happy with what we've got. Sadly, there are no special artifacts. We discovered a seal, but I don't think it's that special. Fujiko replied. I would not be so certain of that. Naruto interjected. As the others looked up, the blonde continued. The granite coffin has some interesting seals. I think it is drawing chakra from the people who visit the shrine, and it does something with it. Tetsu and Harinobu looked like they did not understand what he meant at all, while confusion was evident on Fujiko's face. So what do you want to do with it? Fujiko asked. Me? Naruto replied, slightly confused. Yeah, you. You clearly know more about seals than me, so I defer to you in this case. Fujiko said. It took a few moments for Naruto to mull over it. He had thought he would have to do with simply the scroll he had copied the seals on to study it in his spare time, but Fujiko had essentially given him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted. I think we should open the coffin tomorrow. After we've taken the rest of the treasure, of course. The conversation fell silent after that. Even Harinobu, handing out portions of his stew, did not restart it with a different subject. In silence they all sat and ate, staring at the small fire. Finally, Fujiko stood up and spoke. I'll think about it, and tomorrow I'll give you my answer if we do it or not. Now, off to bed. Tetsu, you have the first watch, Harinobu the second and me the last. Understood. A series of nods was her answer as she searched and found her bedroll. Crawling in it, Fujiko went to sleep. Soon after, Naruto and Harinobu did as well. Naruto woke up to the feeling of someone nudging his leg with his or her foot. Looking up, he saw someone who looked like Fujiko in the dawn's early light. Blinking the bleariness out of his eyes, he spoke up. Fujiko? The one and only. She replied with a grin. I've decided. You can open the coffin, but only after we've stripped the shrine of anything valuable and packed everything so we can leave in a hurry if something goes wrong. Understood? Sure thing, boss. With those words, Naruto stood up and moved to do his work. Grabbing a few of the empty bags, he moved towards the hole he had climbed down the previous day and started to help Tetsu with filling the bags with riches. When another bag was filled, he lifted it as far as he could above his head, where Harinobu would reach down from the hole and grab it. He would bring it outside to Fujiko, who was cleaning up their camping site. It took a while, but soon all the gold and gems and jewels were gone from their underground hiding place. As Fujiko looked upon the neatly stacked bags filled with precious stuff, the backpacks with their gear, she decided it was finally time. Tetsu? She shouted down the hole. Help Naruto with opening the coffin. Both man and boy moved to the side and pushed. Slowly but surely, the granite top started to slide off before reaching over half and crashing down to the ground with an echoing bang. Looking into the coffin, Naruto was disappointed. There were more of the seals, all arranged around a single, hollowed-out cup in the middle of the coffin. In the middle laid a dirty, impure pale green gemstone. That's it? Tetsu asked. Yeah. I don't know what I expected, to be honest. Naruto replied, a sheepish look on his face. These seals are also interesting, so I'll copy them. The stone, on the other hand, does not look very interesting. As Naruto started to copy the many seals inscribed on the inside of the coffin, Tetsu clambered up to the outside. It did not take long for the blonde to finish, and as he was rolling up his scrolls in preparation to leave, a single thought flicked across his mind. It's not like that gem weighs a ton. Reaching out, he grabbed the small crystal, about the size of a chicken's egg that someone had cut lengthwise. Putting the crystal away, he moved to grab the ninja wire and started pulling himself up. As he returned to the surface, he saw his three partners in crime standing, their gear and loot already packed. His backpack and the share of the loot he had to carry stood in front of them. Returning the slab that closed off the treasure room, he gave the shrine one last look before stuffing away his scrolls in his backpack, grabbing all his stuff and moving out. And then, the tripwire went off, the dull droning of the stones falling on the hollow tree trunk echoing through the clearing. Someone was there. What if Naruto was betrayed and banished by TSUANDE bashing, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the